Welcome, Mr. Pringle. Take three, third time on the podcast. Welcome again, Mr. Pringle, on the podcast.
Very good to be here. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. We just been talking just before we start rolling. Man, it's been a long time because I think we did it 2 years ago. We did I think in 2021, in early 2021.
Yeah, it was a good time, and we did a couple shows, and yeah, it's always good to get a good chat in. You're a good brother, and I'm jealous of your beard game. It's very biblical, very biblical. I can't do that.
I got into a lot of trouble because of this, because well, some of my family members didn't like it. So yeah, I guess in a public setting, you gotta be, you're always conscious when you start rolling. Like, I don't want to say too much, maybe. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So,
I try to grow my beard out. It just looks shabby. I'm like, I just shave it off.
okay, you really think it looks good? Good. That's good.
Yeah,
Okay.
man, your
I'll
beard's working.
I'll take it, man. Maybe it's the camera. The camera makes it look
Good filter.
better. Yes. No filter. Just a really old camera. That's what it is. No production value here, not yet. So life brings challenges, and yeah, lately for me has been anger and impatience. I'll just outright admit that, and the job I have is not always easy. But I did I ever ask you, well, what is your job? What do you have like a day job?
I do, unfortunately. Well, unfortunately, I'm a network engineer by day, and I'm also artist, and I make a couple dollars here and there with that. But it's been elusive as a profession, a way to make a living, I should say. And
Yeah.
I've started teaching art as well. So those are all little side gigs. My main job is network engineer. That's how I make my money. That's how I pay my mortgage and throw money on the fire of life. And yeah, that's how I make it.
Okay, awesome. I work in a hostel, and mostly in reception, but I do a little bit of managing of people, but it's volunteers. So
Nice.
yeah. And since we last spoke, I did, because like spiritual work is like peeling an onion, and
Yes, it is.
sometimes I find that sometimes you come across stuff and it kind of feels like it sets you back because it's such a big, sometimes it's trauma that happens. So sometimes it's something you don't want to face. And this is quite often. Yeah.
That's been my experience. Is a big obstacle to healing and spiritual advancement.
Hmm.
You just don't want to look at it. It's too ugly. It's too uncomfortable. And if you're really serious, and this just in my experience, if you're really serious about healing, healing comes first. We're both students of Dr. Hawkins, and
Yeah.
you get on the path of enlightenment, and you're pushing, pushing, pushing. And really, in my case, it's been step one was healing, because there's so much traumas and it affects you in so many ways that you just don't see. There's so much in the unconscious that you are unconscious of. And look at that. Look at the shadow. Even the shadow, above the shadow is just the things that you are aware of, but you just don't like looking at. You suppress them and repress them and you push them down.
Hmm.
You start malfunctioning, and there comes a point where you can't take it anymore, and you have to look at it. Forget enlightenment, forget being a saint, forget all of that. I just need to stop being miserable, and I need to get to a state of stability. And it takes courage, if us being students of Doc, the map of consciousness, the beginning of life, the beginning of power, the beginning of all the things, courage. And you have to face that. To choose courage, in my experience with healing, it's courage, willingness, honesty, humility.
Mm.
That's everything. And without that, there is no progress. And then when you finally get to the traumas and the things that are bugging you, you face them, and it's brutal. It's really, really brutal. once you get through it, you get your way through it and you do it, you'll have major breakthroughs. And then you're like, whoa, I can't believe I put that off this whole time. And that's, everything happens how it should. But if I have any regrets, it's that I didn't get to it earlier.
Right. I mean, the healing journey that you didn't start
Yeah, the
doing.
healing journey, because one thing I noticed was a lot of my spiritual work, being a student of docs and sitting with them, all the things, it was focusing on that, focusing on the teachings, enlightenment, enlightenment, enlightenment. But there was a cowardice within me where I was actually avoiding. I was seeking enlightenment to avoid having to go into the hell.
Oh man.
Because it was so uncomfortable. It was like, if I could just get enlightened, then all that will be left behind. And what's been experientially true, that's not the case. Those things that are there are not going anywhere until you face it with courage and integrity, willingness and honesty and humility. To allow it all to come up, to face it and to own it.
That's interesting. Don't you think I'll play a little bit devil's advocate, because I'm not disagreeing with you, but wouldn't if somebody raises up in consciousness and raises to the level of love, wouldn't that also signify healing? Because you'd have to heal in order to calibrate higher, or not necessarily.
Well, both, right? I mean, you could raise up and be in a loving state, but when there's severe trauma, those are the weights that hold you down. So you could have breakthroughs. I've had many breakthroughs in my path where you're like, whoa, beautiful state. Then those things come up again.
Yeah.
And they're there constantly. So yeah, you could raise up to love, but can you stay there? That's the real trick. And also too, when you go up, maybe we can talk about this today, is a doc told me directly to my face, you're tested at every level. You're tempted at every level. And a lot of those weaknesses get tested. A lot of them are part and parcel of different traumas and different distortions. And so if and Doc always talked about the downside. That's why he is everything. Not many teachers, most teachers talk about the love and the peace and the joy and the rainbows. Doc talked about the downside, the temptations, the downfall of so many. And that is priceless information, because you could shoot through and be in a high state. Then what? Are you forged strongly enough to maintain it? Because when those tests come, they're going for your weaknesses. It's going for it, and it knows you better than you know yourself. So for me, there was so much trauma that was intended to. So I'd be in a great high state. Then something will happen. Something will unfold, some triggering thing, and a real ugliness would come up, and undesirable situations would come up. I just wasn't dealing with it in that loving state. And it reached a point where I was just like, I need to, whatever it is, whatever it takes, bring it up. And I went through quite a process with that, but it was worth it. And, healing and that work, that level of inner work is ongoing. I'm in a better place than I've ever been. But
that's awesome. That's awesome. I did. So I last time I think we spoke, you did. You mentioned some things you tried, but did you try also therapy and other the rest of it, like traditional stuff?
Yeah, I've done a lot of things. So I went to a little bit of traditional talk therapy and really didn't like it. It was just a few things. Obviously there are good therapists out there, and therapy serves a lot of people. For me, though, it just wasn't it. Because for me, as you know, I love to talk. A therapist is a 50-minute hour. So you might just be getting into the thing and hey, time's up. And then a lot of times they're just listening. You're talking and they're listening. It's a very slow, tedious process.
Yeah.
And also too, as a spiritual fella, a lot of therapists occupy a different domain of reality. It's the mental domain. All that's in the mental has roots in the spiritual and consciousness itself. And I have found regular traditional therapy to not be fruitful for me. I would never guide anyone away from it. I can only say for me, it wasn't really it.
Did
And
you ever
so,
try psychoanalysis? Like Doc talked about psychoanalysis sometimes.
no, I never have. I did
Okay.
think about it, but the time when that was on the table for me,
Right.
I was not in a space to do it financially or any other way. It's a huge commitment. It's a huge commitment financially, you know, to go through that process. And it just, in my heart, it was like, this is not it. So I had to go through other ways, and
Mm.
they yielded incredible results for me.
Can we learn about some of the other ways? Because
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
when we last spoke, somebody was really curious about that. They wanted to hear more about the how. Because, like, you know, when I understand it, because when people first discover Doc and all that, it's overwhelming because he's recommending and he's calibrating different teachers, this and that, and so many things. And people are like, well, what do I do? How do I get better? But I think a friend of mine also recently, Dan, that's also been on the podcast, also shifted to healing. So, which is really interesting that you're mentioning healing, because that's all
Healing,
the blocks, right? That's all the blocks that Doc
exactly.
talks about, right?
Well, yeah, like spiritual evolution happens of its own when the barriers are removed.
Mm.
That's what I was missing. I was pushing, you know, my mentality was unconscious, was to be a train, a freight train. I'll just go through whatever it takes. But again, it was cowardice. You know, there was a refusal to look at the pain because I didn't want to be uncomfortable. I
Mm.
didn't want to look at the ugliness. And that was a huge mistake. And then once healing came into my path, it was like, oh my God, I've been pointing in the wrong direction this whole time. And it doesn't deviate from what Doc talks about. For me, I basically, you know, I've been a student of Doc's since 2001, 2002,
Wow.
20 plus years. And, you know, sat with them many times, all these great experiences. And there were always breakthroughs. And then, you know, it's a roller coaster. Doc
Yeah.
talks about it. You go up, you go down, all stops in between. But a few years ago, it was like 5 years ago, hit a real wall, a true dark night of the soul. And it was like the gates of hell. It was spontaneous. I was just sitting in my house in this very chair, in this very room, not doing anything. And it was like the doors of hell opened up in my consciousness. Absolute emptiness and dread
Mm.
and hopelessness. It was more than thought or feeling. It was something else. And it could almost be likened to a demonic attack. Maybe that's a little dramatic, but maybe not. It's definitely something that happened. And it was a shift. And in that space was suicide. It was an attraction to it. Because all throughout my life, had a lot of trauma. I never thought about ending it. This was way different. You know, this was like, hey, what's the point? That was the basic message. What's the point? You know, it's never ending. And it was literally almost like a chant of like, end it, end it, end it. And it was very severe and intense. And I just sat with it, faded. Once it faded, I was like, okay, that's different. Something shifted. And about a week later, came back, same exact experience. And I got a very clear message that it was, I'm not going to win this war and I need help. I didn't know what to do. And I prayed. I said, God, please help me. I don't know what's going
Mm.
on.
Do,
And, but
do you think it was a demonic attack or something different?
hard to say. I do think it was definitely a darker presence. You know, that energy is not of God, right? By their fruits you shall know them. So anything calling end your life, and that's not of divinity. However, God is present in all things, right? So God, could be said, was with me in a state of distress,
Yeah.
saying, "Turn to me, like put down your stubbornness, ask for help." No, and that's one of the downsides of the path of enlightenment. It's a very selfish path. It's me, it's the self, it's going within. It'd be very solitary. And Doc said, anything below 600, you need a savior. And I think that gets overlooked. But anyway, around that time, I was into Joe Rogan's podcast, and he always talks about psychedelics.
Yeah.
And he was talking about mushrooms. And when I was a teenager, I did a lot of mushrooms, and that was my first enlightenment experience in this life. And I had no context for it at all.
DMT?
It was just mushrooms.
Oh, mushrooms, sorry, yeah.
But it was the first enlightenment experience where it was like, whoa, complete radical shift. I had no context. I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
I shifted into hell and then had a hellish experience. But that was a major experience. And then, didn't really do it after that very much, at least. Now, with the spiritual maturity and just where I was, and then I started watching Rogan and I started thinking, if I did that now, I'm curious what my experience would be. So that was in my head. Then this experience happened and I called out, just God, please help me. And eventually, not too long after that, a very fateful event, a good friend of mine who I hadn't talked to for 18 years, came out of nowhere. And it was on my birthday and I posted, and my birthday is actually Sunday. It was a celebration.
Yeah,
I posted on my
birthday.
Thank you. And I said, I've wasted a lot of time in my life. I've been really reckless and I live more purposeful. He saw that and he sent me a message and he said, hey, it sounds like you're ready to do what I do. And I was like, what is that? He goes, oh, you probably heard of it, ayahuasca. I was like, I've never heard of it, but sign me up. Like, whatever it takes.
Yeah.
And so, long story short as I can make it, he looped me in and I went to a ceremony and changed my entire life, my entire path. And in that first ceremony, I was really scared, because my friend said, there's nothing I could tell you that will prepare you for it. There's no way to communicate it. You just have to do it. They said, he advised me to not look at online or what people say. And of course, I didn't listen to that. And I looked and everyone was like, oh, it's so rough. It was rough. It was hell. Yeah. But everyone said it was worth it. So I went there really scared, also ready, a warrior, like ready to die. Whatever it takes is whatever it takes.
Right.
And so I went there and the first ceremony, real divine experience. It was perfect stillness and peace and serenity. There was space that cleared, and it ayahuasca, grandmother ayahuasca, as they call it. She talked to me non-verbally, said, ask me a question. That's why you're here. I just said, anxiety, because I was having debilitating anxiety attacks. And instantly she replied, worthlessness. I was like, whoa. I felt it. I felt the weight of it. I said, why? It showed me my father. I saw how he felt worthless. Then went to his father, saw how he felt worthless. And I saw how it was this karmic pattern was handed down the paternal line, and here it is with me. And didn't know what to do with it, but I knew it was major. All I also knew is that this ayahuasca stuff is where it's at. Like, I'm here. And so I kept going and going and going. And every time it was a new, powerful experience, and went up into the absolute heavens where I wept in the presence of God, like this unbelievable. My friend, who was one of the apprentices, he asked me about my first time. He said, how was it? I said, it was perfect. And he laughed. He said, geez, that's just her election campaign. When you're ready, she'll pull you in and tear you to pieces. And he was right. It took me a few times. It took me, because I was uncomfortable. I wasn't ready. When I was ready, she pulled me in. And like you said at the beginning, it's like an onion. So I went to the outermost layer of the onion, which was the grief. And it was unbelievable. I was getting hit with just waves of grief, and I was literally growling, and kind of alarming everyone in the ceremony. But I also recognized that this has to happen. And after that ceremony, what it was like was that my whole life up until that moment was like my trauma was like a giant redwood tree. It was so wide, couldn't see around it. It was so tall, I couldn't see the top of it. It
Mm,
was so full, it blocked the scenery, it blocked the light, so it was
right.
dark. It was after that ceremony, the tree was cut down. All of a sudden, it was like, oh my God, light, it's warm, I see scenery. Oh my God, complete radical change. And then about a year and a half later, um, a few things happened in my personal life that kicked up a lot of toxicity.
Wow.
Some of those nasty old patterns of behavior and thought and action in me were
Mm,
triggered.
right. It sounds like it was really would you say in doc terminology for people that don't know, doc has a map of consciousness. Well, we should have said that before, I guess, but but I imagine most people that are listening to this probably are familiar with doc. So his map of consciousness goes from 0 to 1,000, when 1,000 is enlightenment and 200
No,
is integrity.
well,
No, 1,000 is, oh, sorry,
700,
1,000 is full enlightenment. Sorry, 600 is
1,000
enlightenment.
is,
Yeah,
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 complete
1,000 is
obliteration,
like
an
Jesus,
ego.
Buddha. Right, right.
Exactly.
Yeah, and would you say because it sounds like to me, if you say, oh, I got rid of a lot of trauma, that would mean that you calibrate higher after it, no? Or
Yeah, that's
not?
fair to say.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's fair to say. Um,
But it begs the question though. In all his years of lecturing, Doc never seemed to recommend I'm like drugs or anything like that. He did say, like, there was an old lecture from the 1980s that I saw, and he was talking about it. But he said they had temporary block. But this seems, but I don't think he ever mentioned ayahuasca, but I could be wrong. And
no,
maybe
he never
somebody.
mentioned it by name. He
Yeah.
did talk about LSD and he did talk about psychedelics in general.
Okay.
Uh, and he did say that it basically does bring you to a true state. You don't stay there. So it
Yeah.
basically gives you a glimpse, and then the elevator comes back down. Then what you're really called for is to get there without it.
Hmm.
Um, but, you know, he definitely was knowledgeable. And did he ever do ayahuasca? I don't know. You know, he's never called it out specifically.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's for me, you know, something. This is my experience with ayahuasca. What it does is called the medicine, right? Because that's its nature.
Mm,
Nature is healing, and there's a difference between being cured, being healed.
mm,
Healed is the within the consciousness level. Cure is a physical thing. You take
right.
medicine, the disease is not there. Healed is the root in consciousness. What ayahuasca does is it brings up what's in the darkness of the unconscious into the light of awareness.
Mm,
And once it's in the light of awareness, now you see. And it presents it in a context of love and healing and compassion. But you're not like overwhelmed and just, you know, breaking. It's showing it to you. Now you're like, oh, didn't see that. Now the decision is yours about how you're going to deal with this, you know.
what to do? Yeah.
And so the big healing for me that changed my whole
Yeah.
life
Well,
was
Doc was also a pragmatist too, so sorry to interrupt, but he
no,
said whatever works, because he would, when in his
yeah,
practice, he would use stuff that others wouldn't. So I'm thinking, because I've talked to other people that this helped a lot. So it seems to me that if this does something, and even though, but Doc didn't, you could argue that Doc didn't mention a lot of things because there's so, the world is such a, like all the teachers and all that. Doc didn't mention everything. So people still to this day talk about teachers that lived
yeah.
during his day, and he didn't mention them anywhere. And they're like, oh, what about this guy? So I'm not saying I'm not for it or against it. I just don't know. But it sounds like your experience is, wow, this was amazing, and this started my healing journey.
No, and yeah, it's one of those things that Doc wouldn't recommend it. You know, it's about,
Yeah,
and like you said, whatever works is whatever works. But another thing too is they could also become a crutch. You know, you have these divine
yeah,
experiences and healing, and you can start chasing that, which is another trap. Back to my story is that as a student of docs for many years, teachings are in you, right? And sitting physically with doc many times, it's in you. What ayahuasca did is, for me, it made the teachings come alive. You don't recognize how much of what we read and what we're like, yes, yes, yes. It's just a program. It's just a word. It's just a thought. When it comes alive, it's like, oh my God, yes. And confirmation. Doc knew exactly what he was talking about. He wasn't just picking that out of his rear end. Yes. So anyway, I went through a year and a half of ayahuasca all the time, because it was every time there was some progress, and sometimes it was hard, sometimes it was amazing and beautiful, and all stops in between. But finally, I had a situation in my personal life where there was a big conflict, and I was very uncomfortable about it, because I knew it's me. I kept projecting it outwards. I knew in my heart that it wasn't outwards, it was really on me. And finally it was like, okay, I'm tired of playing around. Whatever it takes is whatever it takes. And I did an ayahuasca binge for like 2 weeks, just like every other day, back-to-back days, just nonstop.
Wow.
But I had a fixity of focus.
Did you go to a specific place for it, like a different country, or did you?
No, there's places here.
Okay.
There was a place. It's no longer with us, but it was close by, and I had access to it very nearby.
Nice.
And so I was able to partake. And with ayahuasca, I have to say, this is where everyone gets too excited. Ayahuasca is also incredibly dangerous if you do it in the wrong setting with the wrong people. You are stepping into a place, an energy, where your consciousness is really opened. And if you do it with some shady people or non-experienced people, it could be very bad. There are a lot of what are called dark shamans, just like there's dark teachers that are very, very not good. So if you do want to do it, make sure as a validatable fact, the person you're sitting with is reputable and in integrity.
Yeah.
It's not something you want to play around with. And I was blessed to sit with someone who was magnificent.
That's awesome.
So anyway, had this fixity of focus, singular focus, and it was help me see. All I was praying, help me see, help me see. And after about 2 weeks, finally, major breakthrough. And I was given a gift, and I was shown myself through the eyes of others. I was not happy with what I saw.
Wow.
Not happy with what I saw. I saw how much of a jerk I was, how challenging I was. I was like, oh my God, oh my God. I felt their experience of me. It was so like, oh no. And then I started getting flashes of my own life, of certain times where I really crossed the line of behavior. And it was like, oh no, and I started having a lot more compassion for the people that had a problem with me in my life, where it was like, you know what, I would have had a problem with me. And started respecting them more too, for the compassion they've shown me over the years. It was like, wow, if I would have done that to me, I wouldn't have nothing to do with me ever again.
Wow. This brings me back to some of my own stuff in my life, and because you don't really consider it and all that, but consider those situations. But when you talk about being given such a gift, imagine if people listening that wow, because you don't really realize, you don't know, you don't really, you can't be in another man's shoes and walk another person's shoes and walk a mile in them, because you're not really in it. And if you do something or say something to a person that you don't unknowingly triggers them or whatnot, it takes different things for different people. But it's like, yeah, man, I've definitely done that too.
Yeah, well, what was
Wow.
shown was absolute, all-consuming self-absorption
Mm,
that I was
wow.
complete and utter self-absorbed. I was like, oh my, like I'm that guy. Everything I despise in someone else is me. And that was extremely humbling. It was like a punch in the face, is what it was like. It was true. And then all of a sudden, the guilt and the shame really came on. And I started shifting downwards. I mean, really shifting downwards, where it was like, oh my God, I am just the worst and unforgivable and disgusting and just everything. I started really shifting.
Mm.
And
And
my
I
friend,
may I add a quote here? The fear of God is the first step to wisdom. So that seemed like
yes.
that was
Yeah, well,
very,
and
in a
I needed
way.
to get snapped out of my intoxication with myself.
Yes.
And I started seeing that it took me back to that first ceremony. First ceremony, she gave me the master key, which was worthlessness. Everything was in that. That was the master key to unlock every cell door in the penitentiary of trauma. It was my
Mm,
consciousness. It was way bigger than I was ever aware of. And so the worthlessness came up, and I saw how all of my prickishness was coming out of worthlessness. It was me trying to get some kind of love, trying to get some assurance, trying to feel better about myself. So I'm always talking, I'm always joking, because if I could impress you with my words, if I could make you laugh, then you like me. I have worth. The way I, because it was coming out of this inner poison, had the opposite effect. It was pushing people away. It was challenging them in unnecessary ways, and started shifting really down. And my friend who was with me saw it. He said, "Don't forget to love yourself." And that was like a lifesaver. Just held on to that and was like, okay. And then this is where it gets good. So, Christ was there.
mm.
Uh, I saw him not as a visual. I saw him. He was there. He said, what was happening was as I was going into the guilt, I rebutted it choosing pride, which is a lot more in the map of
Sorry, you
consciousness.
said what? Sorry, I couldn't hear the last bit.
So, in the map of consciousness, for you guys who are familiar or not, guilt, the lowest level of consciousness is shame.
Mm,
Right above that is guilt. Those are the most poisonous levels of consciousness. They're the closest to death. It's where so much disease comes, is from guilt. Because in guilt, we feel the need for punishment. And it
mm,
manifests as disease. It's all guilt, though. But when I'm in this guilt and shame, just really spiraling, countered that with pride. Pride is at the upper level of the lower levels.
mm,
Right before integrity is pride. Still selfishness, but there's a lot more energy there. I was choosing pride, and I was like, no, it wasn't all me. About these other people, they were jerks too. But it was the selfish defense within that, with a lack of taking accountability. It was like
mm,
pushing the accountability off. No, 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 no. It was them too. And you know what? I'm right. And you know what? I'm going to stand on this hill and I'm going to die on it. I'm right.
mm,
And Christ was there, I promise you. He told me, non-verbally, but very explicitly, he said, do you want to be right? Do you want peace? That was a doorway. And I said, I want peace. Like I was so tired of the game. It
mm,
didn't matter if I was right. I just don't want conflict. I don't want problems. I don't want all of this. Ugh. And I said, I want peace. And Christ hit me and said, forgiveness, the
mm,
only way. Then, speaking about Doc's teachings and how they come alive, there's a level of understanding of the teachings. Then there's when they unlock. When they unlock, it is radically different. And so the teaching unlocked, what Doc talked about, truth of Christ's teachings of forgiveness. And he said, how Doc explained it in Hawkinsian terms, he said that ego, innocence of the child,
mm-hmm,
Christ always spoke about the innocence of the child. And that innocence never leaves. What that innocence is consciousness itself.
Mm.
Consciousness, like the hardware of a computer, takes any software it's given. There's no self-defense. And so that, recognizing that, seeing it, not just seeing it, is the freedom. That's freedom. Because when you see that everyone, including ourselves, only acting out of programs, there's only innocence, then everything is forgivable.
Wow.
Everything is forgivable. I saw it. I saw it with my father, who was a source of a lot of my trauma. I saw it with everyone else. I saw it with myself too. It was like, oh my God, just random programming. And how could it, and especially with my father, who was a big source of my trauma, there was so much judgment, so much anger. Then when I saw his innocence, it was shown to me, his innocence, the pure innocence of the child. Oh my God, all there is forgiveness. It's like forgiveness is not even a choice. It's what's automatic. You see, not perceive. And what came, there was a huge download of information where it's a vision. All healing is vision.
Mm.
And vision, a byproduct of light. The light comes from one source, which is divinity, is given. And perception, where all suffering is, all
Mm.
suffering. Perception and the ego are the exact same thing. But when you see with the eyes of Christ, with vision, with light, all there is compassion and forgiveness.
Mm.
And
Wow,
yeah,
I just got a visual that perception is like taking putting on different shades of sunglasses. It can
that's
be
exactly what
red,
it
it can
is.
be orange, but each kind of different emotion you take, each level of consciousness, that's the shade. And whatever shade you
Exactly.
have on, everything will look red, everything will look orange, everything will look green,
Exactly.
everything will look purple, but not the
Exactly.
true color. Not the true color.
Exactly.
And
And
you'll
when
be
you
darker.
yes, when you take the glasses off, or when they are taken off, I should say,
Mm.
when you allow them to be taken off, oh my God. It's like I've never seen in my life. Oh my God. And what I was shown is I had the problem I was having in my personal life was there was someone I always had conflict with. It was always a pushing and pulling. Both of us wanted the other to see
Mm.
we were right. We had a validity to our point of view. We both wanted acknowledgement of
Yes.
our reality. And I am a big guy. I'm loud, well spoken. I was more, more of a bull and wanting to be right. And because of the pain that was so intense, had to be right. Because if I was wrong, oh my God, right? And so
Unbearable.
what Christ showed me with forgiveness was ask for forgiveness. That was the branch of the forgiveness tree, right? Because the forgive in my self-absorption, the forgiveness that I was holding was forgiveness of myself, me forgiving others. Completely self-absorbed. Completely. It was me forgive me forgive you. I was missing selfless branch of the tree, which was asking for forgiveness for the pain I caused.
Mm.
And what Christ said, you find yourself at the altar of God, ready to make your offering, which is your life. You find that you have conflict with your brother, drop the offering immediately and go make peace with them. That is so profound because those things within us, we might push it out of awareness, but it's in consciousness. It is affecting. And so finally, I was willing to drop my self absorption and not worry about being validated in my little perception of reality, to simply ask for forgiveness for how much of a jerk I was.
Mm.
I did it. It changed everything. Because when I did that, it changed the whole context of that relationship that was damaged. From that, this enormous load was dropped. I didn't know I was carrying. There's one of the weight loss TV shows that when they lose all the weight after, they're given a bag has all the weight they were carrying, so they could see and feel what they were carrying. And that's
Yeah.
the experience of healing. You don't know what you're carrying because you're so used to carrying it, it's become out of your awareness.
Right.
When you remove it,
Right.
oh my God, and it
That's a
changed.
brilliant visual though from the show. I've never seen that, but that's I can see how it works so well for TV. It's amazing.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with healing and inner work.
Mm,
You think you're okay, and maybe on a level you are, but there's more there. I don't want to sound too arrogant, but I promise you, there's more there. And when you drop it, when you allow, when you have courage and you pick it up out of the unconscious, or allow it to be brought up out of the unconscious, then you have a decision to make about how much does this mean to you? What Christ told me is, do you want to be right or do you want peace?
mm,
That's the only decision. And thankfully, I had enough. I chose peace. Then the way of fixing things was to ask for forgiveness. It was
mm.
coming with selflessness, coming with humility, offering gift to another that, hey, I was wrong. And there was no seeking of validation. And there wasn't even seeking of receiving forgiveness.
Right.
It was about offering it and acknowledging the truth of their reality of me. And by doing that, changed everything, because there was no space. Doc speaks about consciousness, that when, like, he spoke about the experience with the rattlesnake, where it was
Right.
there, and he said if there was anything in him that wanted to strike, the snake would have picked that up, struck
Right.
him. So there was nothing in me seeking something. All I wanted to do was give. And that's what love is. Love only seeks to give. And
Mm,
by doing that, you are allowing a much greater field. It changed my whole life and consciousness just, and then you
wow.
allow, then you allow one, a better life, better relationships, and you allow the next stack to come up.
Man, that really makes it like really accessible and grounding the way you put it. Because I had heard these things before, but if you're not constantly engrossed in studying these things, and um Jesus is my Lord and Savior, but have I how much have I really studied? How much I have prayed, but how have I prayed for forgiveness? Have I forgiven others? There's a person that I'm using for me, but also Doc referenced him, Jesse Lee Peterson, and he
Yeah.
talks about he, he amazing, and he talks about he talks about forgiving your asking forgiveness for your father, or no, forgiving your mother and asking forgiveness for your father, or something like that. Is
Well,
it?
forgive your parents, forgive your mother, and get closer to your father.
And which is really interesting, and but it's also about forgiveness. Is it also asking for forgiveness? I don't know. My brain
Well,
is
he
fried right
says,
now.
apologize for resenting them.
Ah, yes.
Apologize for resenting them and forgive them.
Okay, here's a kind of academic point maybe, but uh the 12-step work, there's a caveat for that. It says at the 8th step, basically something about making amends, except
Yeah.
when to do so would injure them or others.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
feel that's an important caveat, because if you go to somebody and it says, "Hey, forgive me. I've been wanting ill will for you. I've been wanting bad things for you. I've been talking about you behind your back. Please forgive
Yeah.
me." And because that's information they don't know, and that
Yeah.
might actually hurt them.
Yeah.
So,
Well, another thing too, I'm glad you brought that up. That's a good point. Is
mm,
you go everywhere you can make amends. However, sometimes there's only just consequences, right? So you might have maybe wronged someone really badly, and it was so bad and toxic, traumatic, that to re-encounter them would just kick up those feelings, just bring up the pain, um, and maybe cause even a fight or whatever it is. The best thing is to let them move on with their life, that they've moved on. You know, like there's a difference in forgiveness, right? There's a certain surface level of, yeah, I forgive them. It's really just moving on.
Hmm.
It's not really forgiveness. You know, true forgiveness is seeing, because when you see in truth, all there is forgiveness. And, you know, and of course, a miracle says true forgiveness is seeing that there's nothing to forgive.
Hmm.
That's real forgiveness. But with some things, some people, some situations, to encounter them would cause more harm than good. And sometimes you have to be very aware and discerning. Sometimes it's very selfish. You know, like if you really wrong someone, and yeah, they don't want anything to do with you, they don't ever want to see you again, but they've moved on with their life. For you to have a selfish need of, well, I need to make amends, so I'm going to go to this person who doesn't want to see me and say, you know what, when I did this and this and this to you, I'm really sorry about that. Maybe that's a real selfish thing of, well, I need it, you know. And the key to all
Hmm.
of this, my experience, is the selflessness. Sometimes the humility to accept, you know, some consequences you just have to accept.
Right. And
And yeah,
yeah, I heard in a 12-step program in one of the um groups, you might say, is that there was a person talking about there's a principle, apparently. I don't know if you agree with it, that I think it's general a rule that it's good that to forgive first, to forgive the person before you try to make amends. Because if you're coming with a stick, kind of, you know, metaphorically,
yeah,
and come and say, please forgive me, I've done this to you, or oh, sorry, you know, well, you expect them to agree, and if they don't, then you know
yes.
you're,
That's why what was shown to me,
yeah.
I agree with you. But for me, what was shown to me is it's not about them and what they did.
Mm,
It's about you acknowledging what you did, because
yeah.
that is what you're responsible for. And another thing is when you do that sincerely from the heart, uh, really meaning it, most of the time what will happen is they will automatically forgive, ask for forgiveness for them as well,
Mm,
because they see the space. There's no space of, okay, now he's going to judge me. No, you've come there naked, saying, hey, I was so wrong. I was out of line. I'm so sorry. The space is allowed for them to say, you know what, I was wrong. Forgive
mm.
me. If you come and like, you know what, I forgive you because you were wrong. That's energy. You know, the energy is not allowing that.
You know, it's such a simple thing, but to really, if you have a lot of resistance, and most of us have a lot of resistances to doing, it's like pride. The last barrier to getting to
It's
courage is
pride.
pride, and be
It's
like,
pride.
I don't need, you know what, you know, in dog talk, dog phrases, you could be like, you know what, they are below 200. I'm not gonna bother with them. I'm not gonna bother with seeking them out. You know, it's probably a waste of time. I'm just gonna move on, not even talk to them.
Yeah, no, and you said it. It's pride. It's all pride.
Yeah.
And pride is the greatest sin, you know, because it's coated over everything. And in pride is the ultimate glamorization, glorification of yourself.
Hmm.
You know? And so, you know, the ultimate step towards God is humility. That I am not the great creator of, you know, like, no, I am full, you know, and speak Christian terms. I am a sinner. I am full of sin. How can I judge another? You know, Christ said, how could you get the beam out of your own eye before you speak about the speck in someone else's eye? The beam out of your eye, then you could see a speck in someone else's eye.
Hmm. And
Yeah,
what you mentioned is interesting. I am a sinner, yes, but there's also the flip side of that, which is sackcloth and ashes, which Doc
yes,
mentions. But I think it's a common misunderstanding in the some of the Christian churches, which is, I'm bad. I'm, you know, focusing on the shame and the guilt.
yeah,
But you're saying is, seems to me more like recognizing that I have fallen short. In that context, I'm a sinner, but
Yeah,
I don't have to go around and beat myself with proverbial like a stick on my back and beat
no,
down my spirit because I've done this mistake and be guilty. No, it's
yeah.
just asking for forgive. Is it like asking, do you mean asking for forgiveness to God as well? Like I've done,
I mean, yeah, absolutely. It's
yeah.
well, even in asking God for forgiveness, there's just an acknowledgement of I know I have misstepped. And what is sin, right? Sin is an archery term, which
Hmm.
means missing the mark. As Doc said, sin is ignorance, right?
Right.
I said, forgive them for they know not what they do. Ignorance. So you're saying, I'm ignorant. I was ignorant. I made these mistakes. Lord, please forgive me. And even when you're asking God for that, in my experience, it's an acknowledgement of feelings we have about it. That I don't feel good about it. And I would never, Doc said guilt is a mistake. Guilt is narcissism. That's what's really hard to see.
Yeah.
Uh, no, that's not necessary. Like for instance, we punish people for whatever they do, but it's like once they've recognized what they've done, not like really recognized it and say, "Whoa, I made a mistake, and I never want to do that again." There's no more need for punishment.
Mhm.
There's no more need for it. The punishment is not serving anything. Then there's freedom, and you can
Yeah.
start living.
And these big things, they're also small things. Like recently, I got annoyed with somebody coming to work late and then feeling anger, and then later, I'm after that interaction, I'm thinking to myself, what have I done?
Yeah.
You,
Well,
you,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
you know what I mean? It's like
I do.
it's so crazy the knee-jerk reaction of the ego, like to go into anger right
Yeah.
away, impatience.
Well, there's also on this path we walk, the devotion non-duality and the teachings of God. Is the ego is there. It's okay. It's okay. Like Doc said, when someone cuts in front of you in traffic and you want to run them off the road, it's automatic and it's okay. Don't
Mm.
go doing it, but it's okay if you have the feelings. Just don't identify with the feelings and don't get washed in the feelings. It's okay to have them. I want to slap someone every other day, but it's just a feeling. I'm not going to do it. And I'm like, okay, that's there. And at some point, you start laughing at it, and you see the selfishness, the egomania. I, I'm the best. I know what's right. And one thing I learned with healing is once I really broke through, I was like, this is a roadmap for healing. Everyone's suffering.
Mm,
So you want to share it with everyone. And I'm glad we're talking about this here. And I hope everyone who hears it gets something from it. There can be an egomania that comes in. It's
right.
like, I'm a healer. I'm going to save everyone. I know what you need. And the truth is, no, you don't. No, you don't. Everyone heals in their own time, in their own way. And while I do believe everything I experienced is universal, how it looks in each individual experience is different.
Right.
Their own readiness, because you have to be ready to heal. The first, if anyone came to me and said, "How do I do this?" I would say the first step is honesty. Do you want to
Mm,
heal? And one of the toxic things that happens, we get attached for trauma. It's a security blanket, and it's an excuse for bad behavior,
mm.
whining, an excuse. People don't want to give that up. One of the main reasons we don't want to forgive others, we don't want to let them get off. We want them to suffer. That's a
Well, but then
fact.
in the end, we're suffering with that
No,
anger
we're the
anyway.
only ones suffering,
Yeah.
and there's
And
a
then
karma
and
there
then
too.
then it changes the dynamic of the behavior because as Doc says, whatever you hold in mind against somebody, they're gonna take a counter position to that
Exactly,
automatically. So
counterforce.
yeah, counterforce. Force
Yeah, and
demands a
that's
counterforce.
exactly, and that's the space. The constant practice. That's Christ is everything. Is to sit in that with the eyes of Christ and just see the innocence, see how people cannot help but be how they are. That doesn't mean you have to accept it.
Mm,
That doesn't mean you have to be around it. You don't have to approve of it. Like Jesse said, don't hate. don't hate, don't judge. Because the truth is, if you were them and lived their life experiences and within their limitations, you would be the exact same way. So that's the compassion, seeing that they're not bad, they're lost. They're lost and intoxicated in programming, which is completely understandable. And that's where the forgiveness and the compassion and the love really comes in. You can't help it.
Yeah.
Like if someone's lost, and even if their programs are toxic and uncomfortable, does that demand hatred and resentment, or is it even more love and compassion? Like
Right.
you really are lost.
Yeah. It, it's very hard if somebody were to be in politics, let's say. It's very hard to, because it seems like by virtue of the position, let's say, that one occupies, let's say Bill O'Reilly back in the day when he was at his peak, the virtue was judgment. Or I see that a little bit when Jesse, with the way he interviews people and be like, do you love all people? And they're like, yeah, I love all people. Then what about white people? and they don't answer. They're like, I love everybody. He's like, what about white people? He's like, I love everybody. What about white people?
Exactly. And everything has their own domains,
Yes,
of what it's
yes.
all about. For someone like us on a true spiritual path, these things are the absolute barriers to the light. And I would say almost everyone, if not everyone, has some kind of trauma. In some, I liken trauma to a wound. Trauma is a wound.
Yeah.
Some wounds are nothing. You keep going, it doesn't affect you at all. Some leave a little scar, some leave a little mark, but you're fine. Some traumas are like you can't walk on it. You can't go on with it. You have to tend to it, go through the race of life. One thing Doc spoke about, I believe it's in Eye of the Eye, is that childhood, when there's severe trauma, could warp. Byproduct that tends to happen is warping of the personality. That's what happened with me. Is warping. So the ego perception is already certain
Skewed.
distortion. But when that becomes warped, you are fucked. Like you're lost. There's nothing you can do unwarp it, except for choosing willingness and honesty and courage to allow it to be shown to you, to allow it to be undone. And that's just my experience. There's nothing you do. It's an allowance. The only thing you do is make a decision in your heart. Keep going and to open up, open up, open up. Allow the things to be seen. Don't run, don't run, don't run. Keep going. And then eventually, there'll be a breakthrough where it's unwarped. And you're like, oh my God. I didn't even realize how backwards I saw the world and myself.
Yeah. So ayahuasca, was the way ayahuasca the only thing that really started it, or did you continue it then with some other?
Yeah, so I did ayahuasca a lot of times. I can't even tell you how much.
Okay.
But every time.
More than 30 then. More than 30 times.
Probably closer to like 70 or something. But every time was beneficial. Every time. Some more than others. But I also did iboga, which was really grueling. Really, really grueling. And
really, I've never heard of that. Iboga.
Iboga is iboga is made from the bark of an African bush. It's been used in their society for God knows how long. Iboga is like most intense. Like with ayahuasca, you could sit up, you could talk, you could, you're very present.
Yeah.
Iboga, you're not doing anything. You are laid out on the floor. You can't move. You can't talk. You can barely have your eyes open, but you're very present. And that was really brutal. That's not something you do a lot. And it was had a couple beautiful visions on it. You know, like for me, it really brought up a lot of things. I saw the pain in my family, within everyone. I just saw how it was this field of just everyone's in pain.
Mm.
I saw that. I saw pain in my father. You know, my dad, like I said, was a big source of my trauma, and I saw his pain. I cried. It was like the one time the ceremony where I broke down. It was like, oh my
Mm.
God. All of that feeds compassion. I had an amazing vision where I was looking down at the world, and it was, you know, the area of the Middle East and India and Western China.
Yeah.
I was looking at the globe, and I saw this light come down. Whoa. It was like a blue light. It was the Buddha, you know, hitting Nepal. There was like a shock wave. The shock wave went. I saw everywhere it was going was lighting up in blue. It was the blue
Mm.
light that came,
Wow.
and but it would not go west. It was like a wall where the Middle East begins, where it just would not go. Then I saw Christ. I saw the Father. You know, that's this just field. I saw like this little magical energy flowing, and then just it was the Son of Christ. Then I saw Christ come down, purple light. Got it reversed. The Buddha was purple, Christ was blue. It doesn't matter. Christ hit, and it was nuclear. It just whoosh. Nothing could stop the wave. It hit everywhere. Like there was no barrier. And what I saw was that Christ's presence and teachings and art are everywhere. Even people who don't believe in Christianity don't even believe in Christ.
Mm.
What Christ is, when you get the form of Jesus, you know, the person, Christ. Christ is willingness to forgive, a thing in your heart that chooses forgiveness over judgment, chooses humility over pride. That is Christ.
Mm.
That's the more diffuse Christ consciousness. I saw it in everyone. I just saw like a father with his son who was like, you know, I love this boy. That is Christ.
Mm.
And I saw how that affected the whole world and how Christ is unstoppable.
Wow.
It's a joke to think like Christ has no pride. Christ is meek. Christ does not need you to acknowledge his name. It could help, but Christ is there already. Christ is all. He doesn't need anything. He's already doing his work.
Wow.
And it was like, whoa.
I'm
So yeah.
I'm curious, did you see any other and this is more again academic. Did you see any other visions of the other religions, what they did?
No, did not. That was just the Buddha and Christ, and maybe that has a lot to do with that's the focus of my path. You know,
Yes.
Christ, Buddha. So that's what I saw, and Christ is everything. You know, Christ is the primary focus. So seeing, you know, Christ is people, Hawkins students. At the top of the map is Christ, Buddha, Krishna, and some books, Zoroaster.
Zoroaster, yeah.
There's only one Christ. Christ is different. Just because they're at the same level of consciousness, they're at different levels of purpose, different levels of, there's a different nature to what Christ is.
Mm.
There's a higher calling, his mission. The Buddha was the way of enlightenment, which is the way out of this madness. But that's the path for the few. Most people, most people are nowhere near ready for enlightenment.
Right,
They
right,
wouldn't even know how to get there.
right. They're struggling
Christ
with the
is,
basics, like being kind, like Doc Hawkins said, yeah, people are really attracted to the books that calibrate high, but learn to be kind. Just the kindness without exception.
yes,
That's amazing. I can't even begin to think how this is a criticism of myself, how I would have done if I did that, took that to heart and practiced that. Like that's something that even though kindness, I don't know where kind calibrates 250 or something like that, 240,
yeah,
but still, if you practice that, without exception, all the
Yes.
way. It burns away through karma, I would think.
Yeah, it's repetitive. One thing I've really been that's coming up in my inner work lately. It's about patterns. When you feed certain thoughts again and again and again and again, it becomes like a muscle memory. When you make a decision to change the pattern and you start developing a new muscle memory, you're really shifting everything.
Mm-hmm.
Really shifting everything. So just choosing kindness again and again and again. It's a choice for truth. It's a choice for love, gentleness, which again is Christ. And one thing Doc said when he's in this really profound moment, he said Buddha was Christed, because that's why he was at 1,000. If he wasn't Christed, he wouldn't have been at 1,000.
What does that
So
mean?
that was well, Christ consciousness.
Okay.
Like at 1,000, the way it was explained to me, and I understand it. The levels of consciousness are like the pinpoint, and it goes up, 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 up like this. So at this level of 1,000, that you're still in the margarita, in the martini glass.
Yeah.
You're at the top of it where you're seeing the infinite.
Mm.
You're one with the infinite, even though you're in the body. And to be at that level, you're actually Christed, where Christ consciousness is there. The difference is, Christ came from God the Father.
Yeah.
For a very specific role. It's different. So even though the levels of consciousness were the same, there's a difference.
Yeah.
And in my experience, this path, what we're on, is so hard and so challenging. There's so many tests and demonic tests and attacks and temptations. Um, and Doc said you need a savior. And in my experience, you must have Christ. Must. You need a friend and you need a protector and an overseer, because
Mm.
this is a treacherous path. The more you advance, more subtle the serpent gets. And you must have someone you've given your heart to, with Christ. You were talking about it a couple minutes ago about, you love Christ, da, da, da. But there's a decision. There's a difference between loving Christ, studying Christ, believing in Christ, and
Mm.
making a decision to give him your heart, your soul, your mind, your body, your life. That's the key difference.
Mm.
It's that decision in the heart of I serve thee. Take everything.
Mm.
Then you belong to him.
Wow. That's that's a lot for it's so clear the way you describe it. It's quite amazing. Um and also I think for the viewers, so I've not done this, but yeah, uh, on the I meet with some people to do letting go meditation, which a lot of doc students are familiar with. Um and I'm not sure how many podcasts they pray. So the most famous prayer, the Lord's Prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want, we can let's do the Protestant version of the Lord's Prayer. I'll pray.
Yeah,
Okay.
you pray. I'm with you.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Amen. Yes.
Wow. It's
Yes.
yeah. It's so good that I do agree with you that there's a difference. Well, Christ is the only one that didn't have any lifetimes, so
Yeah.
obviously there is a big difference. Just on that is a big
Yes.
difference between that and the others. And but I'm not diminishing if somebody's born a Hindu, somebody's born a Muslim. They all have a value. We're just
Absolutely.
saying, yeah, we're not diminishing.
Yeah.
Um, any of them.
Well, one thing Doc said that's absolutely true is he was speaking about Christ, and he said that throughout all of time, mankind was lost. Right, we were raping and murdering and pillaging and all this good stuff. That's what accrued the karmic debt that's our sin that was going to crush us. And God seeing that we're just lost and that humans are good, it's a good thing. They're just not evolved. So he sent, manifested as Son, Christ, who then came into body as Jesus to sacrifice himself and teach us unconditional love to elevate us to where we're safe.
Mm.
And but Doc said that we earn that right for a savior because of the innocence of our lostness. He said, even if you were worshiping the bear god, we're still worshiping what you believed to be divinity.
Mm.
And so the main point is, no matter what name you call it, no matter what religion, it's about divinity. It's about that higher truth. Whatever it is to you, it's just divinity. As long as your heart is belonging to that, and Doc always said, Krishna would say, whatever name you call me, as long as those who turn to me are mine.
Mm.
That's it. Christ is all. Consciousness is infinite. So Christ's consciousness became flesh. The word became flesh as Jesus. The word is everything. Christ is everything. So it doesn't matter what form it takes.
Mm.
It's just your heart having the meekness and the humility, supplicate to divinity and get rid of that egomania that I am God.
Mm.
That's what gets you in trouble.
Well, some religions would probably be offended but
No, for
that's
sure. Every religion has its downside, and we know some don't
well,
take kindly.
yes, yeah. I mean, there's definitely some famous ones. But Christianity is growing really fast in the world, and I think that and Islam are growing. I don't know which one is growing faster, but because both are
Islam,
growing
I
a
imagine.
lot, both are growing. Yeah, well, Islam is growing a lot in Africa, yes, but then there's also Asia, and there's I think well, in
Christianity,
South
huge portion.
America is well, South America Christianity is pretty deeply rooted, I think,
Yeah,
like the Catholic and the Protestant versions. Um, but it's still growing in Africa, and it's going to Christianity as an Islam, and those two religions hopefully are going to lift up that continent and well, the people. It's not about the continent; it's the people.
yeah.
It's the
It's about the
souls of
level
the
of
people,
consciousness
right?
within the people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I have a lot of friends from all different walks, and I don't care what their religion is. That's the one of the downsides, particularly all religions, but really with Christianity. It's like Christ is the only way, and if you don't believe in Jesus Christ, you're going to hell. And it's like, I
Yeah.
understand, uh, and I feel like there's a certain lack of awareness that they're doing the best they can. They're believing what they believe is divinity, and that is sacred.
Mm.
Devotion is sacred. Um, God's in control. Even in the Bible, it says, the ones God wants, God calls. If God hasn't called them, well, hey, leave it to God, not to you. Uh, you know,
Is that the
we get
parable about
lost.
the seeds? Like some seed falls on ground that's not good, so it doesn't
Yeah, there's the seed that's lost in like the top of the rocks, and the sun comes and burns it up. Then there's the one that's not deeply rooted, and then the adversary comes and rips it out. And then there's the one that's planted deep in the good soil and gives 60, 100-fold fruit
mm,
from its blossomings. And
um
the good soil is goodness, love, truth, divinity embodied by the Christ. But it doesn't necessarily have to be acknowledged in that form.
mm. Wow, we have I didn't expect this. We have a lot to talk about, but I'm mindful of the time. Um I'm
No,
just I just okay, I just want to say that in today's world, it seems like there's the battle between good and evil seems to be more present than ever before. I
I
mean,
agree.
obviously the Cold War, that was kind of, you could say, okay, that was kind of very obvious too. But now it's in a different way. Now it's within us. Like now it's in our culture, in Western culture. And Doc talked about the media, the universities, the academia, the
Mhm.
uh so much stuff that's not in integrity. And I've been in a famous university, well, quite famous in Scotland for 2 years, and I saw firsthand the kind of um like in theater class, just about uh
Of course, it's a theater class.
so political, like that
Yeah,
it's more important to get diversity of the cast than anything else. I'm like
yep,
arguing with the teacher. I'm like, look, I just want to hire the best actress, and he's like, no, you should read the paper about white privilege.
yeah.
He's
It's
telling me.
it's a new religion. It's
It
a new
is,
religion.
it
It's
is.
replaced God for the godless.
Hmm.
And one thing I'm glad this is coming up is the big thing with me is what I see is that one, this is all Lucifer, the distortion of truth,
Yeah.
absolute distortion, and it's becoming more satanic where it's just mask off. And the distortion is so thorough
Yeah.
that it's like I can't even believe this is happening. But for me, I'm probably get in trouble for this. But the main thing that it is to me is toxic femininity. That there's a lack of balance. There's always the masculine and the feminine.
Yes.
Both have their divine natural order roles. Leave
Yes.
society and the world and life balanced. But for because of weak men who have forsaken, who have become ashamed of the masculine and have chosen to be more feminine or to allow the feminine to rule, this is what it looks like. Because the
Mm,
feminine is love, right? So love be distorted. You could love something that's not true.
yes.
And so love is like, no, it's compassion and it's da 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 da. There's no truth with it. But the man is supposed to represent the truth, the cold, hard logic, hey, I don't care how you feel about it. This is what's real. This is what's true. And that split with love and truth is the real, that's what's wrong. Everyone's doing all this out of love, and it's like, or the love is at least surface level belief of what they're doing. And there's other things beneath it.
Yeah.
Truth comes first, you know,
Mm,
like there's man and woman, that's it. It shouldn't be a debate and it shouldn't be a problem. It is because these programs have taken on
yes.
such an unbelievable dimension that they are deified as gods, these beliefs, these programs. And there are
Well,
some people
we
out there
might get
fighting the
canceled for
fight.
this. I think,
Yeah,
well, I have to say, I do post, the podcast somewhere other than YouTube because, unfortunately, the places of free speech are not as so free anymore. And
no,
but this is the zeitgeist. This is the sign of the times right now. And but it will not always be the same. Like when people in the future, if they watch this, it will not be immediately obvious what is happening. But what's happening now is if you speak against the current agenda in the Western world, the LGBTQ plus whatever. There's a lot of different
yeah,
versions of this.
alphabet crew.
if if you speak out against this, you will probably get fired from any government job that you hold. You will get
Oh,
fired
sure.
from any private job that you hold if that comment gets viral, or
Yeah,
somebody gets wind of it, or a supervisor that doesn't like that, or there might be company policy. You might be violating company policy, and you might say, hey, America is a land of free speech. I don't know if your future will be, but I'm hypothetically, but It's not really, because
No, it's
what's,
not.
well, uh there's certain hate speech laws in, let's say, companies, and you might say fair enough, yeah, but it's not, it's just getting out of hand. It's just getting out of hand, you
Because
know.
there's no truth, right?
Yes.
It's like, for some people say there's no such thing as hate speech.
Hmm.
I don't know if that's true or not. You know, there's people like,
Yeah, I know about that either.
yeah, but who's the one determine what's hate and what's not? That's where the line gets all screwed up.
Hmm.
Because, do you want someone at your job who's like, kill all the Jews? Like, no, come on. Right? But when it becomes someone who says, hey, a man is a man, is a woman is a woman, it's like, that's literally genocide. Like, whoa, what? What? And it's changed. And it's changed because there's no one who stands for the truth, no one of charisma, influence, who speaks for the truth, but a few
Well,
people.
there's Trump, very controversial. I think we talked about him before. It's one of the few people in public, but there are very few, you know,
Very few.
because it takes integrity, and also takes you admitting that you will, taking on the risk that you will lose all your reputation and be the bad guy.
And be
And
destroyed. Yeah.
that's something that that's the cross that most people don't want to take on. And because of
No.
that, because people don't want to take that on that cross, en masse, that means that we just follow along whatever the,
Yeah.
as you call it, toxic femininity brings about, and it's
Yeah.
extremely destructive.
Absolutely, it is. It's destructive, and it's funny because it's no one wants to be offensive, and I believe it kind of birthed with men not wanting to lose their sexual access with women, so they want to become more compassionate. I'm with this too. I'm gentle. Uh, when
Right.
throughout all time, and really within women too, is the primal desire for a man. They want the man who is stronger and not going to be pushed around, and tells them, this is like Jesse Lee Peterson stuff, who tells them, hey, you're being crazy. And these are primal things, and there's nothing wrong with it. But the men have completely backed down, and we've allowed insanity to get a real hold and get
Mm,
into institutions and entertainment. And it's a program. And now this is where it becomes satanic, right? At first, no one cares, right? Like, me personally, I don't care what you are. You're trans or whatever the 35,000 genders. I don't care. It doesn't butter my biscuit, right? But on a social level, no one's taking a stand of here's the line.
yeah.
Then it keeps going, 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 going.
Yeah.
Now it's like an actual indoctrination of children, which is way different.
Yeah.
That's a different
Yeah.
energy.
You
You
are
know,
damaging them. You are damaging them for life based on some decision they want the kids to be allowed to take at as young as 5 or 4.
yeah,
And but they're not taking that decision alone. They're taking that decision because, like you said earlier, about being indoctrinated but the software that they get put in is they get suggestions, they get certain questions
yeah,
asked by these people who actually, their incentive, their want in life is to find
yes.
somebody that they can transform from male to female, male to male, or from male to whatever other genders there are, which they believe.
Well,
So,
the other thing too is a few more conservative people pointed this out. It's really about they're seeking validation of their own life.
mm,
That they live what's considered, I believe, still more of a counter uh, culture, alternative path.
mm,
And they have a lot of things with that, a lot of feelings about not being normal or whatever. They want validation. No, this is perfect. This is beautiful. This is, and look at the name of the month, right? It's Pride Month. Pride, us being students of the map of consciousness, Pride, the name of it.
mm,
And, that's somewhat of a rebuttal to the feelings of them being rejected, feeling like nothing and feeling not good enough. And
yeah,
so they believe the counter to that is pride. No, I'm not ashamed. I'm proud of myself. And that's understandable. Then it It's a little morphed and it gets a little in your face, and then it becomes something else.
Mm.
And it's not healthy spiritually. And I hope, I pray that some level of sanity is restored,
Mm.
because most people don't believe in this stuff, but there's no one who's really endorsing. There's no leader, and there is no one to get
Yeah.
behind, and there's an
I,
apathy. It's like, man, what am I going to do
yeah.
about this?
Well, there's also the modern generation of men are indoctrinated that masculinity is bad. There's a flip side of toxic femininity, which is
Yeah,
trying to shape men to be submissive, which in the end is what they don't need anyway. But and they don't
yeah,
like those kind of men. But
no, exactly.
I don't know if you remember, there was about 5 years ago, there was a commercial by Gillette, boys will be boys and all that. It was
Yeah,
very controversial. And Gillette lost billions of dollars, so quite rightly so.
yeah,
um
rightly so.
and yes, but I'm thinking, imagine if somebody, L'Oreal or some company like that, made the female version of it, about perfume, and be like,
Yeah.
hey, I have you been gossiping today? Have you, you can do better. Have you been backstabbing people, making lies about them? Well, you can do better. No, girl, don't do that, you
Have you
know.
felt overwhelmed with the feeling to make a sandwich for your man? This is for you.
Like,
Yeah, it's
it,
insane, and
it,
it's troubling. But
yeah.
one thing too, and Doc said this too about like 9/11. He said 9/11 was the dark forces, kind of their last hurrah. They know that their time is up. Even in the Bible, it says as we get closer and closer to the return of Christ, that the satanic, the demonic will take its mask off and become much more apparent.
Hmm.
And very few things seem more obvious than that's happening right now. Is this, mask off, and just more important than ever for us to
Yeah.
do our own work. Doc said, we for the true seeker of enlightenment, the calling is you have to turn away from the world. That's for some other cause. But if you really want to serve the world, you elevate your own consciousness,
Yeah.
because that elevates everything else. So the
Hmm.
decisions we make in ourselves to be forgiving and stand for truth and all these things starts illuminating options in the collective. They start becoming more chosen.
Yeah.
That's how it seems to me. So I'm not going to go out and march in the streets and all
Yeah.
these
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep doing my inner work,
But
and hopefully,
I quite imagine that, in maybe in a not too far distant future, that people will be, and maybe in some countries where they take these draconian laws, people would be taken to jail for having an opinion like we're speaking of now. Like, because things seem to be getting worse and worse. So, but all it takes is, I think Gandhi was in prison for a long time, but not because of crimes, but because they didn't like him. So it's
it's really true.
quite possible that, in the not too distant future, we will have political prisoners because they disagree with the woke ideology. Like now, right now, people are canceled, which is the it's kind of not so soft version. It's kind of hard, but they
Excommunicating.
still, yeah, they still can live in the world. But the next level would be to imprison them, which I don't know if it will get ever to that level, because
Oh, I think it
uh,
will.
I don't know if you know the book Glamour, A World Problem, that Doc
Yeah,
often
yeah. I have the
mentions.
book. I haven't actually
And
read it, but I have it.
the I read half of it once. Very hard to read, by the way, if anybody wants to attempt that. But the book calibrates in the 500s, mid 500s, and one of the things it says, because I want to leave something positive with this, even though there's a lot of stuff going on that's not good, is that it gives a prediction about 2025. It says, there'd be a lot of social, economic, and political trouble that will be, I think it says, resolved in 2025, or maybe that means it will start to get resolved in 2025 AD. And this book was written back in early 50s. So if
Yeah.
that prediction is correct, which is, I think it's a book written with the help of the White Brotherhood, which calibrates 560 and
Oh
above.
yeah. Familiar.
So if that prediction is true, which I hope it is, that means in just two short years, we might see the bottoming out of the woke ideology. At least that's my optimistic hope. Like
Yeah.
if that prophecy of from Glamour is true, I always like to mention that 2025, it's coming, 2 years.
First of all, my thoughts on the prophecy side of it is everything changed in 1986 when the consciousness went above 100.
Right,
Doc
right,
called that the
right.
second coming of Christ. It changed the entire context of reality. So, a lot of things that were not, are now cannot be.
Hmm.
And when I've not debated, but discussed this with some other fellow seekers of the truth who don't like this. And it's one of the things is it almost has to happen for things to really shift to never allow it to happen again. Like they
Hmm.
keep pushing the ball and they're pushing it so far that we're going to be in a space of like, whoa, no. And it's starting to already happen with all the kids thing. That's where
It's
left and
starting to
right,
happen. It's starting to
yeah,
happen.
the left and right people, no matter what your political alignment is, the line gets drawn at children. If you're a
Mm.
parent, you're a parent first more than
Not
most
just
people.
children, the beer, Bud Light. That company
Yeah,
destroyed itself.
exactly. And
It's
so,
yeah,
but people are finally like, okay, enough is enough. There's
yes,
tolerance and then there's like forced compliance. And when the compliance is mandating you basically give your kid to the state and give it to a radical social movement, that's where people start drawing the line.
yeah.
And I'm hoping, it's unfortunate we've had to even get this far. A lot of times, that's what it takes. That's what it takes
Mm,
for society to recorrect
mm.
and have a reminder of what we could be if we're not standing for the truth. And I hope
Yeah.
nothing. I hope we don't go much further than we already are because it's unbelievable where we are.
It-
But
I am predicting it's gonna get worse before it gets better.
I,
I'm still seeing the downward trend. Although things like the Bud Light beer and all that, there's starting to be a momentum in the other direction, but it's not enough. Jordan Peterson and these people, the popularity rising is good, but it's not. The momentum is still the ship of the Western world is still going down. It's still going down,
yeah,
and maybe I this is just my speculation based on what I've talked to some of the people about. Um, that maybe some of the countries in the West now are actually below because of the amount of falsehood there
I
is.
believe it. Totally believe it.
So, but nothing's over until it's over.
No, and no matter how much the falsehood multiplies and how many numerous people are below integrity, all it takes is a few who are really, really above it to counteract it.
Yeah,
You know, and so that's just more for us. Students of Doc and consciousness. It's just more of a call upon us to do our inner work. Not just for ourselves, but for the totality of mankind, for life. It's a calling. Do your work
yeah.
selflessly.
Hmm. Yeah, because it's going to change. Maybe it doesn't seem like that, but doing healing and removing the blocks, whatever, and doing whatever it takes, whether it be 12 step groups, psychoanalysis, in your case, ayahuasca, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Whatever works,
Well, one more method too I've been doing, and I still do to this day. It's called radical truth.
Mm.
It's a modality that was developed by a student of Doc. He has a few practitioners. I don't know if he doesn't have them, but he there's a few
Oh,
practitioners who learn from him.
I think I know
Um,
one. Yes.
yeah,
What was his name? Can you are you
Manfred.
allowed to share?
Yeah, that's not a secret. Manfred. I forgot his last name.
Oh
Manfred.
yeah, yeah. I know. I definitely know one practitioner. Yeah.
What I've never met him, but what I've understood of him and what I get from him, he was really, really, really amazing person, amazing consciousness, and really brilliant. And he took the teachings, applied them to like a form of therapy.
Right.
And so it uses muscle testing, and you calibrate different fields within consciousness. You start identifying these things that are there, And I've been doing that. I was using one practitioner for a while, then took a break and let life happen, and everything was kind of stable. And then things started coming up again, and an opportunity came to do it again. And so I've been doing that with another practitioner ever since. It has been absolutely a godsend. Just having a good, respectable student of Doc's work, so we're on the same path. Muscle testing can be really tricky to
Yeah.
careful who you trust with it. I
Yeah.
really do trust the practitioner, and it's been so helpful for me. And I've shifted some major things, like past life things, where you identify, oh, this has been with you for 5 lifetimes, or this is in the emotional body, the physical body, blah, blah, blah. You start testing and you identify the entire field. Then so many things are just so diffuse and you just can't see it. And so this modality, I love it. I do it all the time. And so I've just shifted some huge, huge, huge things. And so now I'm kind of letting the energy settle because it's a lot.
Right. Right. I think those kind of modalities, I was just talking to some doc students the other day. I believe, based on the projections of the population of the world going up for a few more decades at least, and the world, let's say the world is still relatively stable in consciousness, or goes up a little bit. And Doc said at the time that it was between 204 and 207 when he was alive. And let's say it goes up maybe even just a few points, 209, 210. And if there's more people, if there's 9 billion people, and let's say go forward in 20 years, that means those kind of modalities, there'll be a lot more expertise, a lot more people doing it. And if the people that are below 200, it goes from 15% to, I don't know, 25% or whatever, that means there'll be a huge pool of people doing this kind of work, and body talk and all the, all that. And they'll be developing maybe new ones, or maybe even more sophisticated or more in-depth ones that you're working with. And that's just exciting for me, because right now what we're seeing that emerging, I think it started really with the late 80s, the kind of alternative stuff, and it's just been growing exponentially ever since, really.
Like I can't recommend Radical Truth enough. It's been absolute godsend. And you don't have to be a doc student to do it. Being a doc student, it's with doc students, developed from a doc student.
Yeah.
It's perfect. It's perfect for me.
I have tried it once.
Awesome.
And it really it shifted, because I had a severe at the time resentment against it was over something really silly against a other doc student, and she was able to shift that, but but that was the only major thing that I was working on at that time. But so I had just one session, so I think, yeah, it definitely works. From my experience, it shifted that relationship real quick, so it definitely does, it does what it says it will do.
We don't understand how the things we hold in consciousness affect us. The unconscious is a dark, dark place, and it's out of awareness. So you don't recognize how, like, this one day, this one moment, this one interaction shifted you. And you have this whole other paradigm that you're holding in mind, you're holding in awareness, whatever, consciousness. It's been with you all this time. And it helps to have these modalities. Like for me, it was ayahuasca and the truth, where you just can't see. It's so ingrained in you. You don't have the awareness to see it. You're uncomfortable, things aren't firing right. It takes, for me, sometimes a little bit of an assist to bring these things up. And then if you're courageous and you're honest and you're humble, then you could maximize the benefit from those gifts that are there. Again, so many people do not want to heal. It's something that's hard for people to understand. Many people don't want to heal, love their suffering, they love it. If you try to take it from them, they will take it back.
Right.
And it's very hard for people to get.
I think something comes to mind is for new doc students. One of the big recommendations I would say is find holy company, whether that if you're a Christian,
Yes.
Catholic, go to church. If you qualify for a 12-step group, go to a group, find a sponsor that you can trust, and getting the support of a sponsor is huge. Or
Yes,
if
it
you're in a
is.
Catholic church confession, even though it might seem
Yes.
trivial, going to communion is tremendously beneficial. Um, and yeah, there's more and more dark students in the world, and also whatever religion you are, if it's above 200, finding other people that would qualify as holy company, people that are on the
Yeah.
path and want to get higher. That's just a given. And if you're with those people, because like how in self-help groups is they say you're the average of the people you hang out with. Well, that's kind of, if you hang out with people, if you try to hang out mostly with people that are above 200 and try to keep that holy company, like have family, you can help, right? If some are below 200, you still love them, but
Yeah.
yeah, you don't go out playing poker with them every day. You don't have to do that.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I just want to feedback on that. Is
Mm,
one of the most important things you can do for your healing, for your mental health, your spiritual health, and your spiritual development is the discipline of holy company and your number one um, calling as a spiritual being is to stand guard over your consciousness. You have to stand guard over it. So it could be people, their energy affects you, music, entertainment, all of those things have enormous effects on you. And it's such a benefit. Become aware of it and to start shifting that muscle memory. Yes, some friends and family probably have to go. Some music, some movies have to go. Because if you're trying to evolve spiritually, stuff is holding you down and it's hard to accept that. I really fought it for a long time. But one thing I saw this guy tweet and I really like it, I'm going to recommend it to everyone here, is stop listening to music with words 30 days. Only listen to wordless music, like holier music, for 30 days and watch and recognize the difference in the field. And
mm,
you'll start seeing how that lower music, and it can feel good. It's pop music or whatever. I like the song. Yeah, but there's a wave in it and it's holding you down. You don't have to do anything. If you love it, do it. But if you're serious about spiritual evolution upward,
mm,
watch that and watch the movies you intake. It could be very entertaining. There's an energy there and it's counter to growth. And that's the discipline of the seeker, is I just can't allow it. Can't allow myself to watch this movie. 150 people get murdered, and like this Quentin Tarantino movie. Like I love Quentin Tarantino movies, and calibrate like 25. So yeah, I can watch it. It's entertaining, but there's an energy there. It's really unhealthy,
mm.
and it does a certain programming in certain ways that you're just unseen. And when you step away from it, when you fast from it, you start noticing the difference. And especially with music, I love this gangster rap song from the 90s. It makes me feel like I'm in high school again. There's a period where the energy is intolerable.
Mm,
You just can't do it. But sometimes you have to distance yourself, allow that. Um, stand vigilant over your consciousness.
yeah, exactly. Sta yeah, be mindful of what you're allowing into your life, because
Yes.
it's everything has a field. And if you're reading books, if you're surrounding yourself with beautiful music, with divine books, holy company, and you're praying, well, I was gonna say fasting. Fasting not necessary, but
Not
it can
necessarily.
help. can help sometimes. It can help as well.
Yeah,
Um,
there's a place for it.
so yeah. I think there's a Padre Pio, a famous Catholic saint. Pray, hope, and don't worry, or something like that.
Yeah,
If you do the
exactly.
best you can, and you're avoiding and it's not so much avoiding the bad stuff, but going towards the good stuff and doing it more, or
Well,
just like switching a hobby from maybe something below 200 to playing tennis or even golf or playing chess,
yeah,
like developing a passion that way, because a lot of times we spend time doing things that we find exciting, but we have to in a way substitute that with something else, and something that will be in the end will probably find more rewarding. Like there's what was his name? Ben Carson. He ran for president unsuccessfully, but he was a very famous surgeon, and
yeah,
his mother, God bless her soul, she forbade them to uh to watch television, just 2 programs a week. She
yeah,
couldn't read herself, but she demanded her kids to read 2 books a week and give her
yeah.
a written report. And through that, within the space of just a few months as a kid, he started enjoying reading. And he was like, man, this is really good. And then he started reading books that he was really interested in and doing reports on that. And then he was going through all the topics that he was interested in. And then he somehow he got into classical music as well. And then he really got into, and that's kind of curiously one of the reasons he got into the famous medical school he did, because the interview process was basically mostly talking about how much they love classical music, and classical music is really good for the brain too. So
Yes,
it's a
absolutely.
whole host of benefits for that.
And that's the field, right? He was
Yeah.
getting more in tune to a field. And one thing Doc said is that, if you really want to elevate your consciousness and you want a kid to evolve the right way, he said, surround them by beauty, beautiful music, beautiful things, art. That's what feeds that field.
Mm,
And we're so awash in dark things. And we're entrained to socially accept it as okay. And it does have a toll. And there was one girl who was talking to Doc, and she had like a demonic thing. He had said, surround yourself with holy things, and he said, flies love shit. Flies are attracted to shit. So when you have these little things that you do, or you watch, or you are
mm,
entertained by, these are doorways where really dark things can come in that are beyond your understanding and beyond your awareness. All of a sudden you're off and things are not going well. It's because there's something that you have accepted a relationship with through your own will. It's dark and
mm.
allows things in, and it could really, really, really do a lot of damage. Sort of the
Yeah.
discipline. It's hard. It's hard.
Yeah. Well, for guys, one of the obvious one is a porn.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of even a lot of popular music and movies are, especially nowadays in Hollywood, like I would say, roughly speaking, 70% of Hollywood movies probably calibrate below 200 or more.
More than
So
that.
yeah.
Well, yeah, pornography is the um, poison of this whole world. It really is. And it's the energy that's there. One thing that really occurred to me recently was, students of Dr. Hawkins. Now, Doc talked about back in the day when there was the gladiator fights. Everyone in the crowd had to put their thumbs up or down for life or
Yeah.
death. He said everyone that participated in it, to say someone has to die, participates in the karma of the death, of the killing.
Mm.
The same thing with pornography. Watching pornography and you're, pleasuring yourself. Sorry, appropriate.
Yeah.
But you're pleasuring yourself and having a sexual pleasure through watching this, right? And on the surface level, it doesn't seem like you're doing anything wrong, right?
Mm.
But when you peel back the layers, you're watching almost always some kind of abused, tormented, twisted child then grew up feeling like trash, feeling worthless, throws herself on the trash to exploit themselves.
Mm.
And you participate in that in a really sick way, getting sexual pleasure off of the fruits of a child's trauma. Even if they're
Mm.
adults now, still the child in there. That's really, really dark karma. And so I'm offering that because I understand how attractive pornography could be. And it's a really dark, dark, dark pit. Once you step in it, gets you. It brings you
Mm.
in. And it brings you into lower and lower and lower and lower. It perverts and it warps because you have aligned with a field through agreement with the relationship with the real darkness, and it starts getting you. And
Mm.
so the best thing to do is one, open your eyes, start trying to see things as they really are, not as they could appear to be. Just because something's socially accepted doesn't make it okay. You know, like with pornography, just because they're adult women who have consented to doing this doesn't make it okay.
Right.
But the will, just because they're saying yes, doesn't mean the motivations for that aren't completely heartbreaking and warped and screwed up. You know, the love of Christ is no, no, and do it. It's really hard.
Yeah.
So the discipline to just, it's okay. We've all watched porn. Most of us, I'm sure, have maybe even gotten lost in a few rabbit holes. What's done is done. From here on out, more disciplined with the ponds that you set your toe in.
Mm.
If you set your toe in there, next thing you know, your leg is in. Next thing you know, you're drowning.
Yeah.
And the discipline is, I'm just not going to put my foot in that water, even though it looks like really refreshing water and I'm really dehydrated. No.
The the thing about the two things, I think first is really, if you because I've been struggling with this for a while. I kind of, not struggling, but you know, the months without and all that. I even asked Doc about this, and he told me, you know, castration. I was like, well,
Yeah.
it is something else other than that. So so really, it's like, but the beating yourself up, that's also shit, and it will attract more flies.
Absolutely.
So, and the other part of it is, small decisions might seem trivial, and holding off or something, or even praying before like, because there's sometimes moments before you, like, you get the thought and you immediately go. But it's like, if you make a different decision, just that small thing alone can save you a lot.
Yes.
Because Doc talked about how it might seem trivial, but this I think he called it Heisenberg principle, that the more you choose something, the more likely you are to choose it again. So that
Yeah.
doesn't mean all it takes for one simple habit to start. It can be a small
Yes.
thing. You say, you delay the bad thing, or you say no, or you know,
Yes.
say no once, and then you're building that muscle, you're building that field,
Exactly.
you're building that
And,
field.
and it takes work. And I'm glad you brought that up too. It's like
Yeah.
guilt is not the answer. You know,
Yeah.
it's a natural mechanism when you do something disgusting, you know, like whatever. Like, oh my God, I'm so terrible. No, no. All that's necessary is to say, okay, I made a mistake. I want to do that again. Correct. That's all that's called for. Guilt is the ego trickery piling back on itself. You know? And then if you really get lost in the guilt, you really develop an apathy. You just don't care. Man, forget it, you know, and just dive into the hell. Now, that's really not good. No, you correct. You develop the habit. You do it one time. No. Next time you have a lot of lust that overcomes you, go for a walk. You know, do 10 push-ups. See how you feel. Whatever it is. Then one day it'll hit you. You'll do it. That's okay. It's okay.
Mm,
You know, Rome was not built in a day. You
right.
just keep applying consistency. And eventually, you have no desire for it, no appetite for it. And really, when you're really evolving, tolerance for it. I can't do
Mm,
it. I can't see this. This is horrid. No, and actually, you mentioned Padre Pio. Let me share this real quick. Padre Pio, who was amazing, and I highly recommend not watching that new movie. It's not good. It isn't good. But
Right, the what's the actor? Yeah, they made a
Shia
movie.
LaBeouf,
Yeah,
Shia
Shia
LaBeouf,
LaBeouf. Yeah.
I don't like his name. But anyway, Padre Pio would take confessions, and he was extremely rough, like really hard. And there was a lady, and I think she was either having an extramarital affair. I think she was having an extramarital affair. She goes to Pio to be absolved, to confess and be absolved. In her heart, nothing changed. She just wanted to confess and be absolved. But in her heart was as soon as she goes back home, she's going to do it again. Right. So she goes to Pio. Pio says, no, you don't mean it and you're disgusting. No. So she goes back home and sits with it, probably does it again. And she comes back. She said, please confess, absolve me. He said, no, you're not worthy of absolution. For the 10th time, he comes back to him. This time, he said, I would rather die than do it. He said, you are absolved. And I've been experiencing it within myself of certain things that I would like. And finally, one thing that really came to me, this actually just happened very recently, was I was seeing that in my heart, I hadn't given my life Christ. I love Christ. I believe in Christ. I follow Christ. There was not the decision of giving from the heart, from the depth of, I am yours.
Mm.
And that was the key. Then from doing that, now all that negative thoughts and the fantasies and the lust, it's just not there. That doesn't mean it doesn't come up and say, hey, how about me? And that's okay. It's not the same. Every step you take away from it, it's further from you. And it takes time. It's okay. It's okay if you slip. Don't stop. And eventually, when your heart belongs to Christ, just can't tolerate it. You have no appetite for it. It's not attractive. Finally, would rather die, have an orgy. And for men, for young men who with functioning biology, orgies, yes, right. But spiritually, as you evolve, it's like, no, that's actually horrible. It's actually disgusting. I could never do that. Exploitation, indulgence in my darkness. No, it's very, very hard to allow, because the sexual energy, especially in the man, so overwhelming. It's the most powerful force on earth. Wars have been fought for it.
Yeah, the only thing I would because people that first encountered the calibrations, they would say, but sex calibrates at 250. I can do, because it's different than porn, right? So, and they would say, but sex calibrates 250, so therefore, I can do
Well,
whatever I want.
There are people who use that as a tool of seduction,
and
they shall go unnamed.
The dog community.
It's happened. It happens.
Oh my gosh.
Anyone who's listening who maybe needs to hear this, be aware. Their fruits you shall know them. Just because sex calibrates at 250 doesn't mean it can't absolutely be used as a tool of manipulation and exploitation. And also, Doc also said how that luciferic distortion of that teaching, sex is holy, let's all have holy sex. It's actually a luciferic inversion in a trap that leads to a fall. It's very important to know. And Doc also said there's high energy sex, low energy sex. Doc told me directly, one of my questions about this stuff. Temptations happen at every level. And he said, when you're a great teacher and everyone's throwing themselves all over you, you're going to know to do this is an abuse of power. It's an abuse of power. And that and the decision is yours. He said most people fall because having power over others and having that influence, because most people are desperate to be in touch with the divine. So if you are a powerful spiritual figure, you have absolute power. And that is a temptation almost no man will ever say no to. And when they do, they use these kind of teachings that sex is holy. It's all there is divinity. Blah, 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 blah. Then they fall for the indulge, they exploit, and bad things happen. So fall for that bullshit. Anyone who's ears needing here.
I love that. Yeah, that's no bullshit.
Yeah, wolves wear sheep's clothing for a reason. You know, underneath they're a wolf, and protect your consciousness. And really, one last point on that is your soul, your heart, your consciousness belongs to God. Your devotion belongs to God, not to a man or woman. You know, any person, any teacher. No, only the Christ is the teacher. Only the Lord is the one that you belong to. Never, ever, ever give your sovereignty to a person because they don't deserve it. They're not capable or worthy of having such a responsibility. Be very careful out there because there are wolves out there.
Yeah.
And
in the Christian terminology, no man is good. The only good man is Jesus.
Yeah, only God is good.
Only God is good, right?
Yeah, and it's true. It's true. There are people who have. There are false teachers out there. There are manipulators out there. There are dark people out there, and there's so many naive and innocent seekers who are earnest in seeking something special. And these wolves are controlled by forces that they don't even understand, and they're completely slaves to it. They're very charismatic, very well spoken, and they're very attractive. Bottom line, very attractive. Never, ever, ever allow yourself to be fallen into their spider web, because that's what it is. And the price that you could pay for falling into that web is severe. Your spiritual, to your heart. Protect that. You know, anyone who is any true spiritual teacher, real one that's worthy of you following, is not going to have sex with you. It should be like red flag number one. You know, if you have this great teacher and they start talking about how sex is holy and we shouldn't be ashamed, and in the Garden of Eden they were naked and free, those are red flags of a wolf, of a serpent. Never do that. You know, Christ wasn't banging his followers. The doc wasn't banging his followers, or his students, I should say. Never ever fall for that bullshit, man. Your spiritual development is too important, and if you do fall for it, the trauma of that so severe. Doc spoke about that. He said that's one of the greatest sins ever. It's called spiritual rape, but to spiritually rape someone's innocence who believes in you, and they find out you're not holy, actually a beast. What that does to them, it does damage that may be irreversible, at least for this lifetime. It's not worth it. So
be careful.
Be aware out there.
Be careful out there. With spiritual teachers and I've known some people that have lived in communities, and then if the teacher is not, then it falls. Then if they fall, then in a peculiar position. And if you're married to some other follower in that particular religion or sect or cult, depending on
cult is a better word for
it. Then it's hard. It's really hard to get out too, because everyone you know is in that group as well.
Absolutely.
So,
the other thing too, I'm glad you said that. The other thing too is seduction is a process. You know, it's not something doesn't present itself like this to you right away. It's a slow burn. It's a seduction of earning your confidence, earning your admiration. Then maybe some amazing teachings, maybe some of it's really helpful and it's really impactful. And what tends to happen is the seeker begins to turn over their authority to this person, and their admiration, respect becomes reverence. And when that happens, it's a really dangerous cocktail, because your authority only belongs, you have authority of yourself in God, in Jesus Christ. That's it. Never give it to a person, because the person is not equipped to deal with that. So even the fallen teachers, there's a part of me that's a real big time spiritual knight. I really don't like it. However, with the eyes of Christ, is that They literally fell for a temptation that anyone would fall for. When someone is giving you all power, all authority, all this crazy sex and beautiful women, of course they fall for it. Why wouldn't they fall for it? Doesn't make it right. You know? And so the seeker should be extremely aware of the reverence and the authority give to a person. You know,
that's one of the big values of Doc's teaching, I think, is the reinforcement of the warning of temptation that Jesus had, but
yeah,
more on a more simple and perhaps more applicable level, which is, like you said, there's temptations on every level. So it's not just about Jesus, 40 nights and 40 days in the desert and then being on the mountaintop. No, it's or about Buddha, Maya tempting him. No, it's about
yeah,
us too. It's about our life. It's about our temptations. It's about our decisions. It's
yeah.
about what we hang out, what we don't hang out with. So that's extremely important as well. So
Well, and one thing to know too is like the dark forces. You know, that is Doc. I love. He called it. He said that which wants to see you fail. You know, which is the demonic, right? They know you. They know you better than you know you. You know your weaknesses. There is literally zero hesitation in them to exploit. There is no moral compass within them. Their whole thing, their being, their nature is to exploit and to destroy. So that's why it's so helpful to know yourself. So if you know you're susceptible to lust and to sex, aware that is how they will attack. Or if what happens oftentimes in many people, but just as we're speaking about this dynamic, is like in a girl, let's say a little girl is seeking the love of a father, seeking the protection of a father, then the teacher represents that. So they give themselves to that father, that protector. Man, become aware. Ask God to show you these things within you. Ask God to show you your weaknesses. Because if you're on this path, you will be tested, you will be tempted, you will be attacked. It's just a fact. Chosen a severe path. So be aware, because you are meat. you are a salmon covered in honey, surrounded by grizzly bears. But be smart, pragmatic, because a lot of the big mistake people make is they think it's spiritual, or everything's good, everything's holy, everything's love. No, it's not at all. It's all. Just because someone is a doc student, that doesn't make them on the path.
exactly. How many Christians are in the world, and how many have, committed crimes, forgery,
Yeah,
blasphemy, all these things and more. Like bearing false witness is very commonplace among politicians that call themselves Christian, but that they
yeah,
do that all like not all the time, but most of the time, the way
yeah,
politics is right now. So yeah, so they don't just trust if somebody is saying what they are. See how they are, the actions, and how they really are. I guess
yeah,
calibration also helps if you have a friend or somebody you trust with that calibration too, which is another tool that sometimes
absolutely.
people have a problem with and be like, oh, it's egoistical to, it's not. It's about knowing the truth. It's about
Yeah,
knowing where something is.
yes. Even with the muscle test, be careful who you trust with the muscle test. Ask a few different people, blind testing, make sure, because there's some people who, for whatever reason, get something way off. So maybe it's a teacher and you really like them, but you feel like you want certainty. You have someone calibrate, and they say, "Oh, there's 600." And maybe not. You know, verify a few other ways. And as always, by their fruits you shall know them. By their fruits. And the false teacher, the tempter, the seducer, they are that because they're good, because they're attractive. They're able to speak in a way that makes you say, oh, this person knows what they're talking about. So you give yourself to them because you're so hungry and innocent and eager, and you don't see the wolf, the serpent underneath that. They will destroy you for their own selfish gain. And they have so many rationalizations and twistings of so many things. You must be careful because they are out there. I'm telling you, they're out there, maybe a little closer than you think. Don't trust any of these people, none of them, not even me. I'm telling you. But seriously, your heart belongs to God, to Christ. Those are the only ones you trust with your soul. Because that's what you're doing when you're following someone. They talk a good game. And one thing Doc said is he said it's so hard to spot some of these fake teachers because sometimes the things they say are accurate, but the context is out.
Yeah.
And like what you said, sex is 250. What's the problem? Yeah, there's a context that they deliberately leave out, and the exploitation is already there. And Doc was saying that there's a certain fallen teacher who his teaching was that there is no doer. Right? And that's true. There is no doer. That's from a certain level of consciousness. So that was the luciferic came into that. Said there is no doer, so do anything you want. And it became sexual exploitation
Oh
of
my gosh.
followers, which led to harm and a crash. And it's not uncommon. And again, completely understandable. Completely understandable. You don't hate these people, as hard as that is for me, especially. Don't hate them. It's like, no, they're just lost and twisted.
Right.
Don't fall into the trap. Your consciousness is so precious, so innocent. It takes any program that's given. Stand vigilant and call upon the protection of Christ from the heart. And God willing, you will be led out of the valley of the shadow of death.
Awesome. That sounds like a good place to end. Do you have any last words before we part? I mean, this was amazing. I didn't expect. I think we went over 2 hours, and might be one of my longest podcasts so far.
Yeah, no, awesome conversation. I'm so glad we're doing it again. And I've had a lot to share. And my sincerest prayer is that anything we talked about or shared is helpful. That's my only prayer. I hope it's helpful, and I hope that it maybe brings you a little comfort and a little boost. And that's it. And again, just be mindful of your own consciousness, and don't be afraid to do the inner work within yourself. And the only help you need is God. The only help you need. So you just call upon that with a sincere heart, and He will come running. Amen. Thank you, Maddie. Always a pleasure. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Kevin Pringle, everybody. God bless everybody, and thank you, Kevin, again.
My
Bye-bye.
pleasure.